The night was silent. The old cemetery stood under the pale moonlight, where broken stones and crooked crosses cast long shadows on the dry ground. The desert wind moved slowly, whispering through the cracks of forgotten graves. It was a place no one wanted to visit after dark. The living avoided it, believing the dead should rest in peace. But this night, peace was broken. Between two old graves, a half-buried figure lay still. The villagers had brought her here days ago. They believed she was gone, lifeless, unworthy of care. They thought her heart had stopped. They left her in the dirt to rot. But they were wrong. A faint breath escaped her lips. It was weak, almost impossible to hear. Her skin was pale, her hands cold, but her chest moved slowly, painfully. The alien woman was not dead. She was fighting against the darkness, holding on to life even when the world had abandoned her. The night grew colder. Above her, the sky spread wide, filled with stars. Each star seemed distant, watching silently. The woman's eyes, half open, reflected a dim glow of starlight. She wanted to cry out, but her voice was only a whisper, broken and small. Still, she tried. Please, no one was supposed to hear. No one came to the cemetery after midnight. And yet, footsteps echoed at the edge of the graveyard. A human man walked slowly, his boots crunching over the sand and gravel. He was not from the village. He was an outsider, a wanderer passing through the desert town. Restless, he had chosen to walk under the moon, searching for silence in a land where silence was heavy. But what he heard was not silence. It was faint, fragile. A sound like a dying bird, or perhaps the wind. He stopped. His eyes scanned the graves. "Hello?" he whispered, unsure. The wind moved again, but then he heard it clearer this time. A weak breath, a broken word. His heart beat faster. No one alive should be here. The cemetery was for the dead. He followed the sound, his lantern light flickering across the stones. Then he saw her, a shape half hidden in the dirt. At first, he thought it was just another body left to decay. But when his light fell on her face, he froze. Her eyes opened, just barely, glimmering with life. Shock spread through him. "You're alive?" he whispered. Her lips moved slowly, forming a plea. "Don't leave me." The man knelt beside her, brushing away the sand that covered her arms. Her skin was not like his. It was pale silver under the moonlight, smooth and strange, yet beautiful. Her fingers trembled as if reaching for him. He had heard stories of aliens, of strange visitors who came from the stars. Some people feared them, some hated them. Maybe that was why the villagers abandoned her, leaving her in the cemetery like she was nothing more than trash. But looking at her now, he could not see a monster. He only saw someone weak, suffering, and in desperate need of help. His hands shook. He was just one man, with no weapon, no plan. Saving her could mean danger. Maybe the villagers would hate him for interfering. Maybe whoever wanted her dead would come looking. But as her eyes closed again, a heavy truth hit him. If he walked away now, she would die for real. The silence of the cemetery pressed on him. The man looked around. No one else was here. The graves were watching, the stars shining cold, but it was only him and her. He made a choice. He reached down and lifted her from the dirt. She was light, weaker than he imagined, her breathing shallow. She rested against his chest like a broken doll. For a moment, fear filled him. The night seemed darker, the shadows heavier. But when he looked at her face, pale and tired, he felt something stronger than fear. He felt responsibility. The man whispered to himself, "I won't let you die here." And with that, he carried her out of the cemetery. The graves behind him stood silent once more, but the night had already changed. Something forgotten had been found. Something left to rot had been given a second chance. Far away, the wind carried a warning. The villagers would discover soon that their secret was gone. The alien woman was alive, and now she was in the hands of a human stranger. But for now. In the silent cemetery, hope had taken its first breath. The desert night stretched wide and endless. A lone figure walked through it, guided only by a lantern and the crunch of sand under his boots. His name was Daniel. He had no family in this town, no friends waiting for him. He was a traveler, a drifter who carried his life in a bag and his memories in silence. Daniel had stopped in this village for water and rest, but the whispers of the people unsettled him. They spoke of strange things, curses, unclean beings, and shadows they feared. They avoided the cemetery like it carried a plague. That was why Daniel went walking there. He didn't believe in curses. To him, fear was just another chain people wrapped around themselves. But tonight, something was different. He wasn't alone. The whisper he heard still echoed in his mind. It was faint, fragile, but it was not the wind. He was certain now. When his lantern showed him the silver-skinned woman half buried in dirt, his heart had nearly stopped. Daniel sat on the edge of the cemetery wall, catching his breath, holding her in his arms. She was alive barely. Her breathing was shallow, her body trembling, but her heart still beat. Every moment he watched her, a storm of questions shook his mind. Who is she? Why did they leave her here? What kind of people bury someone alive? The woman stirred faintly, her lips moving. He leaned closer. Water. Her voice cracked like broken glass. Daniel quickly pulled out his flask. He lifted her head gently and let a few drops touch her lips. She drank with difficulty, each swallow painful, but her eyes opened wider. For the first time, Daniel saw them clearly. Her eyes were not human. They shimmered faint blue, glowing faintly in the dark. They looked like pieces of the night sky trapped in her face. Strange, yes, but not frightening. In those eyes, Daniel saw suffering, but also a desperate will to live. Who did this to you? Daniel asked softly. Her lips quivered, but no answer came. She was too weak. Still, a single tear rolled down her cheek, leaving a line on her pale skin. That one tear spoke more than words. Daniel clenched his jaw. Whoever had left her here wanted her forgotten, wanted her to die slowly in silence. But now she was his responsibility. He rose to his feet, carrying her carefully. She was lighter than he expected, as if life itself was slipping away from her body. He looked back at the cemetery one last time. The grave stood still, cold and uncaring. Daniel's lantern flickered, but his resolve burned steady. He began walking out of the graveyard. Each step echoed louder than the last. The path back to town was empty. The streets were quiet, houses dark, doors locked. Daniel avoided the main road. He didn't want anyone to see what he carried. He didn't trust the villagers, not after what he had seen. At the edge of the desert, Daniel reached the small shack where he had been staying. It wasn't much. A wooden roof, a cot, a table, and a small fire pit, but it was shelter. He pushed the door open with his shoulder and laid the woman gently on the cot. The lantern light filled the room, casting soft shadows over her face. She looked fragile, but strangely beautiful, even in her broken state. Daniel pulled a blanket over her and sat beside the cot, listening to her uneven breathing. For a long moment, he said nothing. He just watched her, torn between disbelief and curiosity. He had traveled across many towns, but he had never seen anything like her. An alien left to rot in a human cemetery. Why? What crime had she committed? The woman stirred again, whispering words he barely caught. Not dead. Please. Her weak plea struck him harder than any blade could. Daniel leaned closer, speaking firmly, almost like a promise. You're safe now. I won't leave you. Her glowing eyes flickered open once more. She stared at him, as if weighing his soul. For a second, Daniel wondered if she could see his thoughts, his memories, the scars of his past. But then her eyes softened, and she closed them again, surrendering to fragile sleep. Daniel exhaled slowly. He felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. He didn't know her name, her story, or the dangers that might follow. But one truth was clear. He had saved her from death, and he couldn't stop now. Outside, the desert wind howled. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and in the dark streets, unseen eyes watched. Someone had noticed Daniel carrying her away. The secret was no longer buried. The night stretched long inside the small shack. The fire's glow flickered across the walls, but Daniel's eyes stayed fixed on the woman lying on the cot. Hours had passed since he had pulled her from the cemetery. She slept most of that time, breathing shallowly, drifting between life and death. Daniel had seen many things in his travels: wars, hunger, betrayal, but never something like this. He sat on the edge of the wooden chair, his flask in his hand, waiting for her to wake again. His thoughts were heavy. If the villagers learn she is alive, they will come for her. And if they find her here, they'll come for me too. Still, when he looked at her pale silver skin and the faint glow in her veins that pulsed like starlight, he knew he couldn't walk away. He had chosen to save her. Now he had to see it through. Suddenly she stirred. Her fingers twitched beneath the blanket. Daniel leaned forward quickly. Her lips moved, forming weak words that broke the silence. "Please, don't let me go back." Her voice was so fragile it almost vanished with the crackle of the fire, but Daniel heard every word. His chest tightened. "You're safe," he said gently. "No one will take you back." Her eyes opened slowly, the strange blue glow shimmering faintly. She stared at him, confusion mixing with fear. For a moment, Daniel wondered if she even understood his words. Then, with great effort, she raised her trembling hand and clutched his sleeve. "Human," she whispered. "They left me to die." Daniel froze. The weight of those words sank into him. The villagers had not buried a stranger by mistake. They had chosen to abandon her. They had left her in the dirt on purpose. Why? He asked softly, though. He wasn't sure she had the strength to answer. Tears welled in her glowing eyes. Her voice shook. "I am not like them. Weak, different, burden." They said, "Better to rot in silence than shame them." Her grip on his sleeve tightened. Desperate, as if he was her last anchor to life. Her eyes pleaded in a way words never could. Daniel felt his throat burn with anger. He had seen cruelty before, but this was worse. To bury someone alive simply because she was different, it was monstrous. No one deserves that. He muttered, his voice hard. The woman swallowed painfully, trying to speak again. "I begged them, begged for mercy, but they turned away. Only you heard me." Her words stabbed at him. Daniel had lived as a wanderer, never staying long in one place, believing the world was too cruel to belong anywhere. But now here, in his small shack, a broken soul begged him not to leave her. For the first time in years, someone needed him. Truly needed him. Her body shook with weakness. Daniel quickly held the flask to her lips again, letting her drink carefully. She coughed but managed to take a little more water. Her voice grew clearer, though still faint. "You are not like them," she whispered. "Your eyes do not look away." Daniel didn't know what to say. He had no grand answers, no promises of safety he could truly keep. All he had was the truth. "I couldn't leave you there," he said finally. "Even if you were a stranger, even if you're not human like me." Her lips curved faintly, almost a ghost of a smile. "Stranger, but kinder than my own blood." Then her strength gave out. She collapsed back against the pillow, her hand slipping from his sleeve. But her eyes stayed on him, pleading silently even as her body weakened. Daniel reached forward and pulled the blanket tighter around her. He felt the weight of her trust, heavy and unshakable. She had given him her plea, and now the choice lay with him. Outside, the desert wind howled against the wooden walls. The village slept, unaware that the one they had left for dead was alive. Unaware that she had found a protector, but Daniel knew it was only a matter of time before someone noticed. The villagers had buried her for a reason. They would not be pleased to see their secret undone. He sat back, his hand on the hilt of the knife in his belt. He had faced danger before, but this felt different. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about her, the desperate alien woman, who had begged not to be abandoned again. And in his heart, Daniel made a silent vow. He would not let her down. Asterisk, the desert sun had not yet risen. Inside the small shack, shadows stretched long, and the fire had burned down to embers. Daniel had not slept. His eyes stayed on the alien woman resting on his cot. Her breathing had grown steadier, but her body still trembled with weakness. Every time she stirred, he leaned forward, ready to give her water or adjust the blanket. He told himself it was simple kindness. But deep inside, he knew it was more than that. The memory of her whisper, "Don't let me go back," echoed in his chest like a vow at last. As the first line of gray touched the window, her eyes opened again. The blue glow inside them flickered faintly, like a dying flame refusing to vanish. She tried to sit up, but her body betrayed her. Daniel placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Easy," he said quietly. "You're safe here." For a moment, she only stared at him, as if weighing his words. Then her lips moved. "Why, help me." Daniel blinked. He had asked himself the same question all night. Why had he lifted her from the dirt when he could have walked away? Why had he risked angering the whole village for a stranger? He had no perfect answer. "Because no one should die alone," he said simply. Her eyes softened. She pulled the blanket closer, her fingers curling tightly into the cloth as though holding onto his words. Then slowly she began to speak again. "They said I was cursed," she whispered, "that my blood was weak, my family, my people. They did not want me. To them I was shame, a broken branch. They feared if I lived, I would bring ruin." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. He had seen cruel families before, but this was worse. To cast out one of their own, to bury her alive as if she were nothing, was beyond cruelty. "Your people did this?" he asked, almost unable to believe it. She nodded. Faintly, a tear sliding down her cheek. "They wanted silence, so they left me among the dead." Better forgotten than remembered. Daniel's chest burned with anger. Better forgotten? He looked at her fragile frame, at the flicker of strength in her glowing eyes, and he thought of the villagers who had passed her by, treating her life as worthless. "They were wrong," he said firmly. "You're not nothing. You're alive. That means you still matter." Her breath caught at his words. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if tasting them, as if storing them somewhere deep inside. When she opened them again, her gaze was clearer. "You do not fear me," she whispered. "Others look away. They see only a monster." Daniel shook his head. "You're no monster. You're someone who was betrayed. That's not your crime. That's theirs." Silence filled the room, heavy but not empty. For the first time, she seemed calmer, as though a small weight had been lifted from her chest. Then she said something that froze him. "They will come." Daniel leaned forward sharply. "Who?" "My people," she said with a broken voice. "They will not allow their secret to escape. If they learn I breathe, they will hunt me. They will hunt you too." The shack suddenly felt smaller, the walls tighter. Daniel's hand drifted toward the knife at his belt, though he knew a blade might not be enough against whatever hunted her. "Then we'll be ready," he said, though doubt flickered in his mind. She studied him with weary eyes. "Why risk your life for me? You owe me nothing." Daniel hesitated. For years he had been a wanderer with no ties, no purpose. But now, sitting across from her, he realized the truth. "Maybe I do owe you," he said at last. Because saving you reminds me I'm still human." Her lips trembled, and for a heartbeat, a faint smile ghosted across her face. Not joy, not yet, but gratitude. The fire crackled softly. Outside, the wind carried the faint sounds of the waking village. Somewhere dogs barked. Somewhere voices stirred. Danger crept closer, but in that small shack, a bond had been formed. She was no longer just the alien woman left to rot. She was a survivor, a secret, and now his responsibility. Daniel leaned back, eyes hard with resolve. If her people came, he would not hand her over. If the villagers knocked, he would not betray her. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But one truth was clear: the world had tried to bury her. Now together, they would uncover the hidden truths and face whatever hunted them. The morning sun rose over the desert town, painting the sand in gold and red. Daniel sat by the window of his shack, his hand wrapped around the hilt of his knife. He had not slept. His ears stayed sharp, waiting for the sound he feared: footsteps. Voices or the heavy knock of villagers at his door. On the cot, the alien woman slept fitfully, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Her silver skin shimmered faintly in the light, a reminder she was not like anyone else. To Daniel, that difference did not matter. But to the villagers, it was the reason they had thrown her into the cemetery. The door rattled suddenly. Daniel's body stiffened. A shadow passed across the window. Then came a voice, sharp and suspicious. "Stranger, open up. We saw you walking last night." Daniel's heart pounded. They had noticed. Someone had seen him carry her from the cemetery. He stepped away from the cot and stood by the door. "I walk where I please," he called back, keeping his voice steady. There was a pause. Then another voice spoke, harsher than the first. "We know what you took." Daniel's grip tightened on his knife. The alien woman stirred on the bed, her glowing eyes half opening. Fear flashed across her face. "They come," she whispered weakly. The knocking grew louder, fists hammering the wooden door. "Open, wanderer! Hand her over. She does not belong with the living." Daniel glanced at the woman. She shook her head, tears shining in her eyes. "Please, don't give me back." The weight of her plea struck him harder than the pounding on the door. He made his choice. Daniel grabbed his bag, stuffed it with his flask and a few supplies, then bent to lift her gently into his arms. She was weak, but she clung to him with trembling hands. The door cracked under another hard blow. Without another word, Daniel slipped out the back window of the shack into the bright morning light. The desert wind hit his face as he landed in the sand. The woman held close against his chest. Shouts rose behind him. "There! He has her!" The chase had begun. Daniel ran, his boots pounding the sand, every muscle straining under the weight of the woman. He wasn't fast enough. Behind him, men from the village gave chase, their anger echoing across the dunes. The woman pressed her face against his shoulder, whispering in a trembling voice, "You cannot outrun them. They will not stop." Daniel gritted his teeth. "Then, we'll make them stop." They raced past broken fences, past cactus fields, and out toward the open desert. The sun climbed higher, burning hot against Daniel's back. Sweat ran down his forehead, but he refused to slow down. Every step was survival. Every step was defiance. Behind him, the voices grew closer. Some carried weapons, spears, blades, even torches, though the morning light was bright. Their footsteps beat like war drums against the sand. "Give her to us." One shouted, "She is cursed." Daniel turned his head and shouted back, his voice like steel, "She is alive. That makes her worth more than all of you." The villagers roared in fury, pushing harder. Daniel's lungs burned. His legs ached. He knew he couldn't run forever. He searched desperately for cover, for anything that might hide them. Ahead, he saw the jagged rocks of an old canyon. He pushed forward, forcing himself faster. The villagers followed, their cries echoing through the desert. At last, Daniel reached the canyon's edge. The rocks rose like sharp teeth from the sand. He ducked into the shadows, pressing himself against the stone, the woman still in his arms. She lifted her glowing eyes to him, whispering through ragged breaths, "Why do you risk everything?" Daniel looked at her, his chest heaving. "Because if I don't, then I'm no better than the ones who left you." Her hand brushed against his arm, faint but filled with trust. For the first time, her fear seemed to soften, but there was no time for peace. The voices grew nearer, footsteps pounding into the canyon. Daniel's hand went to his knife. His heart thundered in his chest. He knew the chase was not over. It was only changing shape. The villagers wanted blood. He would give them something else. Resistance. He whispered to the alien woman, "Stay quiet. Stay with me. No matter what happens." She nodded faintly, her eyes locked on his face. The shadows of the pursuers stretched across the rocks. The desert wind carried their angry voices closer. The hunt was not ending. It was just beginning. The canyon walls rose like jagged blades around them, trapping Daniel and the alien woman in a cage of stone and shadow. The shouts of the villagers echoed through the narrow pass, bouncing off the rocks so it felt like their pursuers were everywhere. Daniel pressed his back against the stone, the woman still in his arms. His chest heaved with every breath. Sweat ran down his brow, stinging his eyes. He could hear the villagers drawing closer, their boots striking the ground, their voices thick with anger. He looked at the woman. Her skin shimmered faintly, glowing, even in the dim light. She was exhausted, her body weak, but her eyes burned with something new. Not fear, not despair. Something deeper, something she had buried. "You can't run anymore," she whispered, her voice trembling but sure. "They won't stop. But I can help." Daniel frowned. "You're too weak." Her lips curled in the faintest shadow of a smile. "Weak? That's what they told me. That's why they left me to rot. But they were wrong." Before he could answer, she raised her trembling hand. Her fingers shook, but when she pressed her palm against the canyon wall, the air rippled. The stone itself vibrated with a low hum. A faint blue glow spread beneath her skin, tracing lines through her arm, as if her blood was alive with fire. Daniel stared in disbelief. He had seen nothing like it. The hum grew stronger. Loose pebbles rattled across the ground. The villagers' voices grew louder, closer. Then, with a sudden crack, the stone wall split slightly, opening just enough for Daniel and the woman to slip through into a narrow crevice. "Go," she whispered, her hand falling weakly back to her side. Daniel caught her before she collapsed. He guided her into the crevice, pulling her into the shadows just as the first villagers rushed into the canyon. They crouched together, pressed close in the darkness, listening as the pursuers shouted angrily, their footsteps scattering in every direction. "Find them," one voice thundered. "They can't have vanished." Daniel's heart pounded, but he stayed still, holding her close, both of them hidden in the stone's embrace. The glow from her veins faded, leaving only the soft warmth of her breath against his chest. After long, tense minutes, the voices grew distant. The villagers moved deeper into the canyon, searching elsewhere. For now they were safe. Daniel exhaled slowly, finally allowing himself to breathe. He looked down at her. Her eyes were half shut, her body drained from the effort. Yet when she saw him watching, she whispered, "I told you. I am not so weak." A smile tugged at the corner of his lips despite the danger. "No, you're not weak. You're stronger than anyone who left you behind." Her eyes softened, glimmering faintly in the dark. "Then why do I feel strong only when you're near?" Daniel's chest tightened. He had wandered through countless towns, always alone, always detached. But now, here in the shadows of the canyon, holding her close, he realized something had changed. She was not just a stranger he had rescued. She was someone who trusted him with everything she had left. I don't know, he admitted quietly. But maybe strength isn't something you carry alone. Maybe it's something we share. Her trembling fingers brushed against his arm, light as a whisper. Then I will share mine with you. Silence wrapped around them, not heavy like before, but warm. For the first time since he had found her in the cemetery, Daniel felt they were not two broken souls running from death. They were partners, bound by survival, by trust, by something deeper neither dared name yet. The sound of the villagers faded completely. The desert wind swept through the canyon, carrying away their shouts. The danger was not gone, it would return, stronger, but in that hidden crevice. A new bond had been forged. Daniel leaned his head back against the stone, exhaustion finally tugging at him. The alien woman rested against his chest, her breath steady, her body weak but no longer defeated. For the first time, Daniel whispered her a promise, soft but unshakable. As long as I breathe, you won't be alone again. Her eyes closed, a faint peace settling over her face. In that moment, in the shadows of the canyon, she was no longer the outcast left to rot. She was alive. She was wanted. And together, they were no longer running alone. The desert night returned, cold and sharp under the stars. Daniel and the alien woman had found no rest since hiding in the canyon. They knew the chase would not end. The villagers would not stop searching. And her people, the ones who had cast her aside, would not forgive her survival. Daniel sat by a small fire at the canyon's edge, sharpening his knife. His eyes stayed on the horizon, watching the glow of torches moving across the sand. The hunt was closing in again. On the stone nearby, the woman sat wrapped in a blanket, her glowing eyes fixed on him. Her body was weak, but inside her there was a new fire. She had tasted her strength, and now it flickered, refusing to fade. They will come tonight, she whispered. Daniel nodded. Then tonight we end it. She studied him for a long moment, then asked softly, Why do you fight for me, human? You could leave, and they would forget you. Daniel's hand stilled on the blade. He looked up, meeting her gaze. Because they tried to bury you like you were nothing. And I won't let the world decide your worth. You deserve a life. You deserve a choice. That's enough for me. Her lips parted as if to reply, but no words came. Instead, she reached out, placing her trembling hand over his. The bond between them was silent but strong. Then the sound came, boots striking stone, voices shouting, torches casting orange, firelight against the canyon walls. The villagers had found them. Daniel rose, pulling her gently to her feet. He knew they couldn't run anymore. The canyon was a dead end. The time for flight was over. Now was the time to stand. The first villager stepped into the firelight, his face twisted with rage. Give her to us, wanderer. She is cursed. She will bring ruin on us all. Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between them and the woman. His knife glinted in the firelight. She's alive. That makes her more human than any of you. The crowd roared, anger like thunder in the canyon. They surged forward, weapons raised. Daniel braced himself, ready to fight, ready to fall if he had to. But before the first blow could land, the alien woman's voice rose behind him. No more. Her words echoed, strange and powerful, carrying through the canyon like a wave. Daniel turned just in time to see her step into the firelight. The glow in her veins burst to life, bright and fierce, spreading across her arms, her face, her whole body. The villagers froze. Fear flickered in their eyes. With a cry that was both pain and strength, she raised her hands. The ground shuddered, stones cracked. The fire flared as if pulled higher by her will. A wave of force pushed outward, scattering the villagers back, knocking weapons from their hands. Daniel shielded his eyes, but he didn't back away. He had seen her weakness. Now he saw her power, and to him both were real. Both were hers. The villagers stumbled, staring in shock. Some whispered prayers, Others' curses. She stepped forward, her voice steady now. You left me to rot. You called me cursed, but I am alive. And I will not be your shame. The villagers looked from her, glowing form, to Daniel, who stood by her side, unflinching. Together, they were no longer prey. They were defiance itself. Fear broke the mob. One by one, torches fell to the ground. The villagers turned and fled into the night, their shouts fading into silence. The canyon grew quiet again, lit only by the fire and the stars above. The woman sank to her knees, her glow fading as exhaustion claimed her. Daniel rushed to her side, catching her before she fell. You did it, he whispered, his voice rough with awe. You stood against them. They'll never try to bury you again. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. But this time they were not from fear. I was strong because you believed I could be. You gave me back my life. Daniel shook his head. No, you took it back yourself. I only stood with you. For a long moment, they held each other under the stars, two souls who had been broken by the world but had found strength together. The desert was still dangerous. Her people might come. More trials would follow. But for now, in the quiet after the storm, there was victory. She was no longer the woman abandoned in the cemetery. She was no longer the outcast left to rot. She was alive. She was free, and she was not alone.